What's up everybody, Tones here. Just a quick reminder after the video, be sure to visit our website at www.tonesoverthings.com and check out some of our exclusive channel merch. Links in the description. Enjoy the video. What's up everybody, welcome to Tones Overthinks It, the show where I think too much to make up for the people who don't think at all. For a time, I've considered the possibility of categorizing frauditors, perhaps arranging them into tiers depending on the type of person they are and the actions they perform. However, this proved difficult as there is no real way to judge which frauditor is the worst, as with every passing week they seem to be one-upping one another or changing tactics. So attempting to organize them into a hierarchy or some kind of rating system is not easy. However, I do give credit to Hezokai for doing a fantastic job using an iceberg graph to give us a good understanding of where these frauditors stand in terms of their objectives and their tactics. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll have a link in the description and I really recommend you check it out. And while you're there, if you haven't already, be sure to give Hezokai a like and a subscribe. Tell him I sent you. So with all that said, I felt if I was going to categorize frauditors, I needed something a little more fluid, something that I could easily take any point in time in a frauditor's career, and I am heavily finger quoting that word, and effectively place where they are and possibly where they're going. And so I have created the Frauditor Venn diagram. Now the first thing this diagram does is separate frauditors into 4 prominent groups, where if you name any frauditor, they are going to fall into at least one of these categories. Now first we'll start with the lost causers. Now these are the people who are, as I've said in the past, the true believers. They're the ones who think that despite over 200 years since this country was founded, and in that time it's in fact expanded the rights and liberties of its citizens, they think that somehow our constitutional rights are under constant threat and take it upon themselves to go out and expose the tyranny and corruption, even though it doesn't actually exist, at least not to the extreme that they think it does. And despite their zealotry, though, they are not quite prepared to push the envelope far enough to constantly get arrested. They often just argue only the law and its merits, and they don't really resort to petty name-calling or threats. There is certainly a level of delusion there, and often they seem dismissive of facts because it doesn't go with their narrative, very much like the flat earthers. So based on my observations of these people, there are a number of frauditors who would fit at least into this core category and its subgroups. Frauditors such as Long Island Audit, Denver Metro Audit, Amagansett Press, people who think what they're doing is for a worthy cause, but in reality they're not actually accomplishing anything, and they're very much unwilling to listen to any evidence that supports that fact. Now moving clockwise, we next have dangerous. Now these are the frauditors who have committed or expressed a willingness to commit acts of violence, despite whatever their motivations may be. Often they will brandish weapons, such as pepper spray, tasers, or even firearms, and are very quick to rationalize the prospect of using them. Often they're highly aggressive, whether it's open hostility or seeming to have a lot of pent-up anger that can be triggered if the wrong thing is said. Like these guys, I think, are going to snap at some point, and probably somebody's going to get hurt. Frauditors who would fit in this category and its subcategories would include SGV News First, Texas Sheepdog, News Now Ninja, and Amagansett Press. Note that I've mentioned the same frauditor twice in different categories. I'll cover that momentarily. From here we move into the third major category that I call the broken. Now these are the guys who have effectively run their lives into the ground, whether it was from their decision to become a frauditor or poor decisions they made prior to that led them to becoming frauditors. These guys usually come with pretty extensive criminal records and pretty much have reduced their lives to nothing because they're unemployable and they're usually homeless and complete destitute, yet somehow they're able to cling to their channels despite having incredibly small audiences, and my guess would be that they do this as a way to cope with their failures. Examples I would place here would include Broken System, Broken Trust, Glenn Serio, and Jeremiah Payne. And finally, the last major category are the clowns. Now these are people who have absolutely no noble intentions. They do this strictly to stir up conflict and mess with people for entertainment purposes to make money. Pretty much the born-again YouTube pranksters, and they continuously escalate their methods in order to gain more prominence and more attention online and thus grow their audiences and their ad revenue. Now examples of these are fairly obvious. You have Auditing America, DirectD, NewsNow Ninja again, and Annapolis Audits. You will find most frauditors in this category. However, as we're now about to explore, there is overlap between these four major categories, and not all frauditors are created equally. And that's what makes this diagram unique. Any 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of these core categories will overlap and create a subcategory that fits any frauditor perfectly. And because it's not a fixed list, like a ranking or hierarchy, frauditors can shift between the neighboring subcategories. And thus we could see how they've descended deeper and deeper into whatever category they started with, ultimately showing and possibly even predicting where they will inevitably end up. And you are bound to find almost any frauditor within one of these areas of overlap. If I were to give an example off the top of my head, say for instance, auditing Erie County, aka Daniel Warmis. He started out as a lost causer, and then once he became involved in the January 6th Capitol riot, he descended into the dangerous portion of that overlap, and thus was under the terrorist category. Though some of his more recent content has had him attempting to provoke responses, and thus has descended into the clown territory, and he's become a red flagger. Based on this, and the fact that last I heard he was still on probation, if he gets arrested, he will then descend into broken, and have to serve time in prison, thus putting him in the end of rotors. However, if we start to see Warmis abandon all pretense of being an activist or journalist of any kind, we could see him shift up towards liars, in which he's just making a mockery of everything he's doing and not taking it seriously, or he can descend further into the dangerous territory by attempting to provoke even more violent encounters, and thus enter the assholes subcategory. In any case, whatever direction frauditors take, it will inevitably lead to the center, where all of their poor decisions will eventually catch up to them. Now, this system of categorization is by no means perfect. It's still very much a work in progress, but I'd like to think that even in its current state, it does give you some understanding of what kind of people frauditors are. And if you're asking the question as to why this is even important, remember what I said earlier. Not all frauditors are created equal. They each come from a different direction as far as their motives, and what may necessarily act as a deterrent to one of them may not necessarily work for the rest. So my answer to the question is, if you are intent on solving a problem, then it is a good start to at least try to understand the nature of it. But, then again, maybe I'm just overthinking it. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like what you see here and you want to see even more in the future, please consider subscribing to my channel. Also, feel free to share your thoughts down in the comment section. I always love to read them. Till next time. By the way, I'm hoping to use this diagram for reference in future videos. I just figured that going through all the detailed explanation of it deserved its own thing. So don't worry, this isn't becoming a boring lecture channel or anything.